Hello. My grandmother used to come into my room when I was a child and look at me and say, "Grandson, you look like you have the whole world on your mind, and you look terribly worried." And I've never overcame that. And tonight, I have four illustrious gentlemen to try to discuss the problems that we have here and how we can get through it. In fact, this is the second part. So I have Carl Pearson, activist, civil rights attorney, and a wonderful, wonderful creator of many, many things that we need and want. Matthew Abuelo of the West Side Neighborhood Coalition. Jonathan Rubin of the New York Society of the Clearwater, which, you know, Pete Seeger had something to do with it. He's the vice president. And I have Fred J. Berg, which is a lawyer. Now, I don't know if you're supposed to be a tenant lawyer. I think many people who have super bucks say you're supposed to be a landlord lawyer. But what are you doing being a tenant lawyer? What's wrong with you? So, Jonathan, you were making a great point before. Can you?
Yes, I'll try to be very succinct about it. There was a usurpation of rights in Washington before the election of President Barack Obama. That usurpation of rights had enacted by the President of the United States at the urging of former Halliburton executive Cheney, Vice President Cheney, that is, of the 2005 National Energy Act. The problem with that act is it said fracking is okay and you can violate the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Resources Conservation and Recovering Act. Why is that a problem? Because the process was vastly expanded in the United States during those years. It was used in Ohio, Delaware, and Pennsylvania, connected to the Marcellus Shale. That's why they want to do that hydrofracking process in New York, because there's a vast reserves of the Marcellus Shale in western New York, and it was done in Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. And why is that a problem? As I said before, the fracking process emits radon, a radioactive material, arsenic, a poison, and benzene, which is flammable. Why is that a problem? The results of the emission of those chemicals in the water supply has caused cancer and has caused seizures for people living close to the places that they thought were gold mines for their income by selling their property. The problem is that the government and the corporations have not understood that capital and property are not the problem here, but people's survival is the problem here. That basically, if we allow this process to continue, there's going to be vastly increased death rates, and people are not necessarily going to be safe anymore. We here in New York City love to say we have phenomenal water. I don't know whether that's going to continue if what Governor Patterson said in July 2008 as his law to expedite the permitting of gas drilling is going to be done. I mean, he hasn't done it a great deal because there's been a tremendous amount of protest. And I will tell the listeners today that Theo Colburn, an endocrinologist, has done a DVD in which he comments about the fracking process and its harms to people's health. There's another book, another DVD called Split Estate that Joe Levine of New York Water has helped to produce. And that shows that people who bought land in Colorado, their dream homes, they thought that they were going to never have problems, but they didn't realize they didn't own the rights to the underground areas of their land, and that corporations, energy corporations specifically, could frack on those lands. And then finally, as I mentioned to your listeners before, this is not just an American problem. Worldwide, death is caused to a child every 8 seconds by corrupted water or polluted water, and that's a fact that we could remedy. We don't have, there are corporations that could really do something to remedy this problem, but greed and corruption is also a problem. But the New York State fracking process has not really gotten underway in a great amount of difficulty yet. There is gas drilling going on. It's not at the Marcellus Shale, to my knowledge, and there is federal legislation in the House and the Senate called the FRAC Act. It's important to pass the FRAC Act and to have President Obama sign the FRAC Act to reverse the horror of Cheney and President George W. Bush, because they usurped the law in what's known as a signing statement. And the signing statement says a law or a policy that the President of the United States didn't like, he can just write a paragraph or two or have his staffers do that, and he can overturn the law. And that is a very undemocratic process, and that almost brings us to times pre-Magna Carta. But that's what the last administration really did to this country.
Wow, yeah, that's really quite a scenario that you presented to us. And it's important that we act on it. And Carl wants to say a few words about it.
Well, I just had this thought that we talk about solar energy and other renewable sources of energy, and the thought that I had initially was, well, we could easily have these sources to purify the water, but the electrical or the energy required to do that should really just replace the other energy so that we don't have to frack, we just use renewable energy instead.
That would be very good.
Yeah.
That would be very good. The consequences of impurities in the water is, is cascading at some time.
Yeah.
And not only do you get, does it affect the public health, because public water supply is used to cook, and also for for children to bathe, and for care and health care. It's also used to fertilize land and to grow new crops and things like that. So it really has to be a kind of a priority issue, and we have to have means to do it cheaply and efficiently. The consequences, for example, in the city, just here in New York City, of impurities in the water supply, it affects the pipes in the buildings. We have buildings that are, the housing stock here, or the building stock really, goes back how many years? 350 years. And, early corrosion of, we were talking on the last show about landlords and, the irrationality. Sometimes they're just reacting because they didn't anticipate the infrastructure of that particular building to decay that quickly or that soon, or some other, event causing it, as a result, they get stressed out and worried about, maintaining their fiscal, soundness when they have buildings that have aged too quickly, because of perhaps smog sometimes causes facades on the buildings to decay, quickly. And the city has a lot of good rules, to maintain the housing stock, where people live. So, but it's a pretty rigorous job, all the way around. Tenants have to be especially vigilant. They can be important, information providers to landlords and to the city and to other organizations and to groups like Josh's group, to help them, shepherd resources to needed areas and things like that.
And what's so tragic is we have the cleanest and cheapest water in the world. And on this very day, in 2010, in today's paper, they said that the people of Haiti presently have a zero supply of water. So as you see, as I opened up the show, the troubles of the world are ingrained in my face. You want to say something about that, John?
I just, 500,000 people, the headline said, may have died there. It's just unbelievable. And they don't have a hospitalization, they don't have water, they don't have any infrastructure, but that's the consequence of having no economy, and that's where we're heading, and that's what we can look forward to. Yeah.
What's phenomenal is that actually here there are, in terms of the healthcare, there have been actually, from what I know of, at least 2 very long-term contexts, where a relationship was cultivated over, 20, 30 years, to get healthcare providers and healthcare information down to people there. So hopefully, that all that work that was done in the past to create those lines of communication and transferring resources and personnel and expertise will pay off now, in the face of a disaster like this. It's so tragic.
What I wanted to say, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting here, is I understand working with small communities, you can sometimes be very effective, but Geoffrey Canada started the Harlem Academy of Education in a community to really jumpstart education in that community, number one, which is improving the education system in the community, number two, and number three, with regard to urban as opposed to small community education, it's very interesting and it's very sad. I happen to have read in one of the political historical books that I read from time to time, and I knew that for many years, education at the college level was free in New York City. City College was a free education institution till the late 70s. But Mayor Koch, sending Bruce Gould to do his bidding, killed free education in New York City. Now, to some extent, it's not totally his fault. President Ford said no bailout to New York City for the economic trouble, and Mayor Koch had a lot of problems to deal with. I don't like Mayor Koch, but that's neither here nor there. I also really don't like the ending of free education in New York City. We have a lot of immigrants in New York City who could have benefited from that education. And as a matter of fact, a relative of mine, my distinguished grandfather, was a City College professor for many years. And I think he was a professor through the education system to the end of free education, and then he retired. And it's very, very sad when you do things like that. I understand working with small communities, you can be very effective, but I don't believe that the urban areas have to fall apart. I think the economy, unfortunately, is the overriding factor, and whether we like it or not, that is a problem. But I don't think education, even at the college level, has to be pay education. It just has to be something considered, well, we can give back the skill attainment to our youth, even if they're not originally from the United States.
Yes, Jonathan, I want to mention that I do a radio show on WBAI. I'm the producer and the founder of a show called CUNY, A Mission Deferred. Originally my name was, the name of the show was CUNY, A Mission Subverted, but we all got together and said, let's do the same thing as Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes said that instead of saying that freedom was subverted, let's say freedom was deferred. So I thought about it and I said, that's a great idea, and we changed the name to CUNY, A Mission Deferred, which is on the last Wednesday of every month at 11 a.m. over WBAI 99.5, and I have a large group of professors and students and staff members to discuss that issue of how CUNY was absolutely free in 5 boroughs for 149 years. You got that right. 149 years. And now, because of some whim-wham by our mayors, Koch and Giuliani and Herman Badillo, it went down to 2, and it desperately has to be reinstated. And Carl is working on that.
I've got the problem that I see, and my background is that I have spent most of my life in or around or owning schools. I have too much educational background. I created the paralegal field in 1972, and my school ran for 18 years that I owned and ran myself. So I have a huge background here. I wrote a book called Self-Employment, in which I advocate that people consider not going to school anymore because the cost of higher education has now reached a point where it can't be repaid by people depending upon what kind of a job they get, if any, and the costs of doing it, the student loans that they can't get out of when they go into bankruptcy, they can't schedule them. So the problem that I see here is a simple one, and that is that you have a combination of student loans that dictate how much a university charges for tuition. I will tell you that we do not set tuition according to what the price should be. We set it according to how much the student is able to borrow. That's what we do in the school business. Another factor is that in state-run and privately, non-profit-run schools with accreditation, there is the problem that the university is forced into or desires to pay more than the market really requires them to pay in order to maintain happiness among this closed group and to maintain their accreditation. But they don't reflect they don't change these rates according to a declining economy. So as people in America are earning less, they can just afford less education. It's like a municipal union that when times are tough, they get raises and the rest of us go unemployed. It's similar in the school business, in the nonprofit and state and city-run school business. So we have to do something about that. My solution there, and I have solutions to a lot of things. I've thought through how the problem can be addressed. With overpayment to municipal employees and consultants, I advocate that we have a partial involuntary bankruptcy proceeding that would address solely that problem and not take on any other problems of a municipality. Just the overpayment of wages and consulting fees, which politically the leaders can't do anything about. But if you get into federal bankruptcy court, you'd be surprised. The power of the federal judge will be such that the politicians, elected leaders, will be leaping at the opportunity of having input, because if they don't, it can really get away from them. So I'm urging that we have an involuntary bankruptcy, which municipalities are allowed to have, but that it be limited only to the issue of this.
I actually think I've seen something about that on the internet. I thought I caught a little blurb very quickly, so it's percolating through already.
Yeah.
But you see, I understand that that's a good idea, but in the late 70s crisis, yes, the president okayed it, but some of the senators also approved of it. And I interned for one of those senators, Senator Sasser from Tennessee, and I think his chairman, Senator Proxmire. They were into their parochial interests about the economic crisis here in New York. They weren't understanding the scope and the nature of the problem, and that problem was going to affect their localities. Because when you have a exchange economy, and when you have a market, a stock market, and you have other types of business that go on here in New York City, a financial center, like it or not, and you say, we're not going to bail out New York City, that doesn't just wreck New York City. That has ramifications all over the country, even in Proxmire's municipality, even Sasser's municipality. And one of the staffers at Sasser's office, unfortunately, said something which stuck in my mind and really bothered me. That staffer said, "You New Yorkers, rich or poor, all think you're entitled," as if we think we're entitled to this or that, being poor people who are dependent on government support, or as if those fortunate enough by birth to have some kind of good background think everything is open-doored for us. It doesn't work that way. You have to work. You have to work very hard to get where you want. Sometimes even when you work for many, many years, you don't accomplish what you want because of oppressive systems.
Part of this, I call it the big VIG problem. In other words, I have identified a group of different fields which have excessive charges to the public, which I view as vigorous. Mafia type vigorous, maybe I'm going beyond, I shouldn't call it mafia type, but vig comes from the mafia loan sharking, and they give you $100 and they want $10 a week in vig for the $100 that you borrow. So we have a variety of things in our economy where we're charging vig, and that's coming out of your pocket and mine and leaving less money for us to handle the problems that we need to address.
Right.
So that the vig is that we have gambling interests that are given a license to take, I mean, even the state taking 50% of the bet. And you have the casinos that are taking an outrageous amount. So you have vig in the casinos. You have vig in the no-bid contracts. You have vig in the municipal unions that are getting far more than a free market would give these people. You have vig in monopolies. You have vig in trademarks. You have vigs in patents. You have vigs all over the place. And there's nothing left for us. The vig is taking everything here. And we got to stop it somehow. So I've been an antitrust lawyer, and it doesn't work. I can't enforce the antitrust laws so that they get more money because we allow them to charge vig. We charge monopolistic rates which are, by definition, far higher than a reasonable return. That's what a monopoly is. We've got to start enforcing the law and stopping big vig from ruining the country and the whole panoply of vig, as I see it.
Point.
Yeah.
Well, I would,
Yeah.
I would
One thing
say,
I just wanted to say on, if the public, there's something missing in the equation, and that's the public. If the public made itself knowledgeable, became familiar with what, and decided what it needed, and became activists, wouldn't that make a difference?
well,
No.
I would say this real quick. I mean, if you take a look, the big problem right now is how our entire electoral system works. Those companies, corporations, private individuals who contribute the most to this or that politician's campaign, they're going to get what they want. You know, not 1 cent is ever given without a string attached to it. And obviously Monsanto, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Texaco, name your own corporation, certainly has more money than you or I, and certainly has much more political pull than any of us on this panel. One of the things that is currently being suggested right now up in Albany, and I would suggest would be a really good idea nationwide, would have a public funded electoral system that would, well, the state isn't going this far, but I would say that no politician would be allowed to take a single corporate dollar at all. That there would be, of course, it would raise our taxes, but the everyday public would pay for our elections, and everybody would get a flat rate, for their campaigns. Everybody would be on equal footing, saying this is what you get, now go and run with it. I think that's the only way that you put the public's voice back into back into legislation.
Can I address that just because I've been dealing with this my whole life? I have come up with solutions that I can implement. Everyone else comes up with solutions that are ideal, and you are hoping that the people who are causing the problem will recognize this and cure it. They won't. So we've got to deal with what we can do rather than what it should be. And if what we can do at a grassroots level works out, maybe it will accomplish what we want in the long run. But the things that you're saying are idealistic, and it's not going to occur.
Except, I think we're all Democrats on this panel, and I think that as Democrats we should be parties of the people. And I worked on the 1992 unsuccessful presidential campaign, and it was really killed here in New York City because New York City, as I said, is the financial center, and the former California governor, Jerry Brown, threatened the New York moneyed interests because they all wanted to control the president. Somebody like Donald Trump with his billions wanted his developments or whatever he wanted. He wanted to control who was elected. Now, Governor Brown, just so we're clear here, did not start with campaign finance and low contributions in 1992. Governor Brown did two things. He supported workers' rights with the Agricultural Labor Relations Act of 1974, and he enacted, which was enacted by California, and he enacted a law concerning a limitation to lobby a public official at the time with $10 so that would control the financing of campaigns. And I agree with Matthew that we're taking the political power from the people by the moneyed interests supporting who's elected, and not only supporting who's elected, getting the leverage on the elected officials and getting the leverage to enact legislation. That means that we're going back to do something which James Madison warned of, which is the rise of factions. It means the people with the money in this country think that their power is more important than the common citizen.
You're identifying the problem, and we all agree that that's the problem. The problem that I've been doing is, how do you solve it? In theory, it would be great if we did the right thing, but we're not doing it. Every 4 years, we have a chance of electing someone who will really take care of the problem. And it's a shell game, as we now see, that we elected the one who we knew and honestly was really going to take care of the problem. Of course, nothing happened. And every 4 years, it'll be that way. So we have to do something different. It's not working out to have the people really vote for who they really want. It's not going to work out. It hasn't ever. Bush 3 is in office. It isn't changing anything at all. And I think that we have to look at different ways, and I say let's go to a grassroots level and really take one town and reform it. And if we can do that, just you and I can walk and knock on every goddamn door in the town. There's a town of 7,500 people has 2,500 homes. A team of 10 only has 250 homes to knock on. You can do that in 2 months. We can reform one town. And let's hope that from there it'll work out. That's a
Carl, I think you really have the right spin on it, and I realize, even by the way I think, that you're absolutely right. This is a good way to get started. And we have to reach out, and we have to make a difference, because time is short, and it is obvious things are getting worse.
Yeah.
And you don't have to watch the forensic files to realize that's so. Okay, finish up a little, guys. Go ahead.
I just want to add that one thing.
go ahead.
I think anybody. One thing I learned in law school, was in my professional ethics and even in tort class, was that a lawyer and even a non-lawyer advocate doesn't have to be a patsy for the system. On the other hand, we all have to work vigorously to make the system work for everybody. We can't forget about the public good. You can't just say that everything's falling apart. I agree with a lot of what you said, but I think that there's still on both sides that are working, that have interests. It's just policies get implemented differently. I don't want to say that there's no there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans, but there's substantive differences, and that what's I'm not ready to say that things have failed. I think that already. I think that there's a lot of people out there working vigorously who still have a lot of energy, getting up every day, trying to make a contribution for themselves, their families, their friends, their communities, and they're out there doing good. I think there's people working. We're not your community out in Ohio. That little kind of experiment is taking off already in ways you may not realize, but not in the way you think it should happen,
right.
because you have an idea, but there's little pieces of it all around.
I hope so.
I feel there is. I think the way you've crystallized all of the issues is brilliant.